This is You've Already Been Hacked, recorded on 15 May 2021. What a week for cybersecurity. Let's just get started with where we are with the Colonial Pipeline incident. Now, if you recall, we covered this last Saturday before everything went completely insane come Monday morning. President Joe Biden this past week stated that the Russian government was not behind the ransomware attack that struck the Colonial Pipeline. His statement was, quote, "We do not believe the Russian government was involved with the attack, but we do have a strong reason to believe that criminals who did the attack are living in Russia," at a press conference that happened this past Thursday. So that may have been why some of the early reports were sort of leaning towards it may have been state-sponsored and the Russians, probably because of where they were tracing back the activity coming from. But again, we've talked about this before. Just because activity is coming from country X, country Y, or IPZ, it doesn't mean that's actually where they are. In this case, it may seem to be that way because, according to news reports, those that perpetrated this incident are known as DarkSide. They are a ransomware as a service criminal organization. According to various news outlets, Colonial Pipeline reportedly paid $5 million to the criminals who perpetrated the attack in order to get the decryption key. So, if this is DarkSide, it is true to form. According to a report from Mandiant, researchers said that DarkSide is, as I stated, a ransomware as a service organization and have launched campaigns in more than a dozen countries targeted at multiple industries. Now, ransomware as a service programs are typically leverage financial motivated partners in crime to execute cyber attacks. DarkSide blamed the attack on an affiliate, saying in a statement posted on their website, quote, "Our goal is to make money and not create problems for society," unquote. Well, maybe they went too far. They were probably going after Colonial's administrative network, and depending on how Colonial had their system set up, or maybe they didn't notice something in an audit or whatever, I'm sure it will all come out in the wash. So all of this is speculation. Perhaps DarkSide's ransomware jumped from the administrative network to the OT network, and that is why Colonial had to shut everything down. Again, speculation on my part, don't know that for fact, but it seems that hypothesis may hold, especially if Colonial did pay $5 million to get the decryption key. In response to the event with Colonial, although probably it was in the works already, although well-timed, President Biden signed an executive order that will significantly tighten cybersecurity rules for government contractors and set up an incident review board that will attempt to blunt the impact of major hacks. Now, I think that the tightening of rules is going to be excellent because I think that will have a reverberating effect that will end up out at the consumer level because companies don't want to have multiple different ways of doing things. It's just too expensive over the long term. So whatever they have to do for one of their largest customers, they'll end up doing for all of them, or at least a portion of it for all of them because it's a cost-saving measure. So that's good. Incident review board, TBD. We'll see what can come from that because most attacks happen due to bugs and whatnot that companies aren't even aware are there. And blunting the impact of it may be something that is very difficult to do. But let's let's give it a chance and see where it goes. The executive order comes as the U.S. government is still grappling with the fallout from breaches at key software suppliers and Colonial. So all these things together. The order requires federal contractors to promptly report cyber incidents to agencies and establish a new government entity modeled after the National Transportation Safety Board to review major breaches. So hopefully lessons learned come out and get publicized, and shared widely so that companies can be more well prepared into the future. It also requires software that the government buys to meet a baseline set of security standards. And this is an effort to make it harder for hackers to tamper with code that ends up on federal networks. And that's the part that I think will ultimately proliferate and expand out into just the general commercial markets as well. With regard to government agencies, they're going to have to take a hard look at this executive order and determine whether or not they actually already have the money on hand, the resources on hand, the personnel to deliver what the order's tasks require. And it could require further action from the White House as well. Agencies will likely need to write new regulations stemming from this order and then weigh whether those policies are too important to follow for full period of public feedback. It's a process that will impact tech companies for certain. It will impact major federal contractors for certain. How fast is the only question mark. Now, Colonial just didn't affect the U.S. East Coast. Supply-wise, yes, but it had a very reverberating effect globally. South Korea's Ministry of Trade, Energy, and Infrastructure has ordered a review of the cybersecurity preparedness of the nation's energy infrastructure. The Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy convened a meeting on the 11th of May, saying it was needed considering the ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline that shuttered one of the U.S.'s main oil transport facilities. In a statement, quote, "In the wake of this disruption, it is necessary to thoroughly examine whether cybersecurity preparedness and countermeasures for our energy-related infrastructure are properly in place," unquote. This was a very hastily pulled together meeting and agenda, and the agenda had added onto it a discussion of countermeasures from the government to attacks such as those that, like Colonial. So this caught many people flat-footed. Not really sure why. We've been expecting stuff like this and saying that these were possibilities for well over a decade at this point. But maybe that's the good that comes from it. Being very reactionary, governments will now take note. Industries will take note and say, we can't afford to be down for a week. We cannot allow the infrastructure to be down for a week for hundreds of thousands, if not, well, this would have been tens of millions of people. So, yeah, the fallout of this particular incident could be far more positive than negative. Although, on the flip side, I'm sure plenty of cyber criminals and nation states took note of how much disruption occurred, and that could be the prelude to a nightmare scenario, which is very, very upsetting. Also this week, one of the best, most comprehensive yet readable reports related to cybersecurity came out, and that is the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. This year, the report is stating that human interaction plays a part in most breaches, which, while the statement sounds, we would have figured that, the data really supports that, and that's the important part, right? I'm hoping that people realize that while we all believe a thing, having the information and the rigor behind it to state where we have to focus our energies, efforts, and resources is really the important part. So, web application attacks, phishing, and ransomware all increased over the past year. And this is an emphasis on the attackers shifting, taking advantage of people working from home and spending more time online due to the pandemic. So the human environment rapidly changed where to focus both the threat and the threat model in the cyber environment. 85% attacks in 2020 involved human interaction. Now, the report is 120 pages of data, trends, and analysis. About a year in which cybercrime accelerated as many other aspects of regular life essentially slowed down or stopped. The report analyzes nearly 30,000 quality incidents, and quality is determined by the researchers at Verizon. So take that for what it's worth. But I've used this report for um, multiple years in my class that I teach. So I find it very valid. But take my opinion for what that's worth to you as well. So out of that 30,000, 5,258 this year were confirmed breaches, 1/3 more compared to last year's report. Some of the data, points of interest out of this report: the median financial impact of breaches last year was $21,659, with 95% of incidents falling between $826 and $653,000. For note, since we just talked about Colonial, the median amount lost to ransomware was $11,000, and the range of losses in 95% of attacks that cost victims ranged from as little as $70 to $1.2 million. Phishing and ransomware both went up this past year, 11% and 6% respectively. That's how much they increased, right? So the year before, phishing was seen in 25% of breaches. This year it was at 36. Data shows attacks with a negative change in 2020 include, with negative changes, meaning they went down, include misdelivery, password dumpers, privilege abuse, misconfiguration, theft, vulnerability exploits, and data mishandling. All of those went down. More than 60% of breaches involved credential data, so someone stealing passwords and usernames, or the loss of passwords and usernames to then have the rest of the breach occur. And 95% of organizations experiencing credential stuffing attacks had between 637 and 3.3 billion malicious login attempts throughout the past year. The most common forms of social engineering that were used, which shows that there's a trend to simplicity that's occurring, are phishing, as we've talked about, and then the second biggest one was business email compromises. BECs doubled last year, and that's double from the year before. Of 58% of BCE attacks that successfully stole money, the median loss was $30,000. 95% of BCE attacks costed somewhere between $250,000 and $984,000. So we're talking about everything across the board, right? As you can see, the swing is wild. The median, okay, thank you for telling me where the middle point is, but depending on who you are, that's how much they're going to take, right? So target of opportunity, planned, it almost doesn't matter. If they can squeeze you for something, they're going to squeeze you for something. And that's what I see in this data. Of the breaches that were analyzed, and remember, we're talking about, they did 30,000 incidents, 5,200 or so were confirmed breaches. 85% of those had a human element. Now, that's a broad term, and it encompasses any attack that involves a social action. Phishing, business email compromise, lost or stolen credentials, insecure credentials, a la password 12345, that sort of stuff. Human error, misuse, and even malware that has to be clicked on to be downloaded. So what we're talking about in all of those is a level of human behavior that has caused 85% of the breaches that were studied. Attacks on web applications made up 39% of all breaches, which underscores a real problem and a challenge for businesses as they face a move to more information being stored in the cloud. And with regard to that, sadly, 96% of mail servers compromised in the attacks that were examined were compromised via something that was cloud-based. And this led to the compromise of personal, internal, and medical information. And the researchers state that they don't know a way and they don't have a specific recommendation to predict or mitigate the big one-off security events that are the exception to the norm. It's going to be a change in how we, the end user, operate that's going to help mitigate the majority of these attacks, right? If 85% of breaches are caused by a human interaction of some sort, that means we have a long way to go to training our workforces, our families, our friends to act in a different way when they access an internet connected device, whether that be a smart speaker, a smart thermostat, a computer, a phone, a tablet, internet connected TV, a watch, pick your item. We have to do a better job in not just making these devices simpler to secure, but a better job in helping our people understand how to secure themselves. Because the devices may have bugs in them, those they can't stop. But the way you interact with the device, what you do with it, how you store your information, what you open, what you don't, that's on you. And we really need to do a better job across the board for everyone. We are starting to see that the stakes are getting higher from the fallout of people just trying to get extorted money. That's all for the news this week. I'm your professor of cyber risk. We'll talk again soon. If you like this podcast, share it with your colleagues and friends. Your support is how we are able to continue to make this content. Thank you.